Welcome to another episode of the Unleashing the Future of Work podcast with Tim Salamis, the Future of Work. And today I have an awesome special guest on the episode with me today. He's my brother, co-founder, the man who is transforming the world of education, the global education tech visionary and leader. Mike Yates is an alternative education visionary, innovator, and public speaker. He's taught in public, private, and charter schools for 5+ years, during which he helped 89% of his students earn commended on the Texas State Standardized Test and helped more than 75% of his students earn 4s and 5s on state-mandated TAP advanced placement tests. Although Mike has won numerous teaching and coaching awards, he still found himself unable to help kids the way he deserved. And because of that, he's building Guide. He's our co-founder. And more importantly, he's transforming the way we think about education as a lead guide at Alpha, one of the top private schools in Texas, in the Austin area. And, today I want to have Mike talk a little bit more about, one, the future of education and why we believe it's not in the classroom. So without further ado, let me have Mike join us as our special guest today. Mike, what's good, man?
Hey, how's it going? I'm good.
How are you doing, during this COVID-19 pandemic, bro?
I'm good. I mean, I'm in the house more.
Yeah.
I like being at home. My kids are joining me for meetings and whatnot. So they're making noise in the background. So
it's the new normal,
cool,
man.
Though.
Yeah,
it is the new normal. Yeah.
So let me ask you, Mike, I would love for you to kind of like give us a breakdown of your background. How did you get into the work that you're doing now, with our team at Guide, in addition to the work you're doing at Alpha? How did you get involved and passionate about education, brother?
So I was always pretty restless for, in terms of education. I grew up in school hating school. Like I thought it was BS. And
yeah,
when I was in 7th grade, I had this teacher named Miss McGowan who accused me of plagiarism. And she said, quote, "There's no way a 7th grader could write like this." And I thought, well, this is like, I wrote this paper. So I'm like, what do you want me to do? And turnitin.com was fairly new at the time. So I was like, well, you had me submit it to turnitin.com. Look at the originality report. And the originality report confirmed that I did, in fact, write the paper. And she said, no, this technology is not trustworthy. And still tried to fail me for the assignment. This is also the same teacher that told me that the internet wouldn't be around forever. And so since that day, when in 7th grade, I lost all trust that I had for school. And I realized a couple of things is that my teachers were preparing me, even though they didn't trust me, they were preparing me for a world that they live in currently. And I knew that like the world is going to change. I was a kid that like, once I figured out what like everything that was on the internet, I was like, whoa, like you can sell stuff on eBay. You can look things up. There was you could ask Jeeves anything you wanted. And he had all the answers. I thought Wikipedia was incredible the first time I was on it. But my English teachers were like, don't go to Wikipedia. So I had this deep-seated mistrust for the school system. And then I had a teacher named Mr. Martin, Heath Martin, who he didn't restore my faith, but he showed me a different side of school and let me know that there were teachers that deeply cared for students. He was my speech and debate coach in high school. And one of my favorite stories about him is that at one point in time, a member of my team was disqualified at a speech tournament for doing something that was not illegal. And he went into the room where most of the coaches and the judges were, and he literally stood on a table and was like, "That's fine. If y'all want to disqualify us, we out. We're gonna leave right now, but we'll see y'all at nationals." And then stormed out, and we're outside like, "Yeah, that's what I'm doing." But like that depiction is like how much he cared about us. He wasn't concerned with the rule. He cared about us, knowing that he was there, going to go to bat for us. So I learned that educators could be powerful, but I still didn't want to be a part of the school system. So my whole career has been spent trying to, the first 5 years of my education career formally, I spent trying to innovate the system from within. And then I realized like this thing is too big and too old. And I specifically am not the person. There are people who are doing great work within the traditional school system, but I'm not that person. I decided to get out of it and work around it and outside of it to put pressure on that system to change, but all the while creating great options for people outside of the school system.
And, you know, with that said, Patricia is saying, man, Mike, I've always wanted to hear your story. You know, wherever you're viewing and tuning in from, please show some love in the comments. We'll shout you out and make sure we recognize and show you some love. You know, Carlene is saying, you know, the future of education will require classrooms. This is not only false, but extremely dangerous. True teaching is entirely built upon relationships and rapport between people and teachers. Shout out to Carlene for that. You know, and Mike is saying, so Sheila is saying, Mike, I had the same experience in high school in terms of teachers who are trying to prepare you for a world that won't exist, actually. You know, so talk to us a little bit about that, Mike. You know, you were talking about, you know, you were working in the traditional school system, looking to disrupt it, and you were like, you know what, I got to get out. You know, so how did that lead you to, one, the work that you're doing now? And I also want you to describe, you know, what is the world that's being built now for a student in this generation?
So the first question you said, you want me to describe like why I got out?
Yeah.
I got out because I learned year over year that the system was not only broken, but it was rotten. Like I started having these really like interesting experiences in all sorts of school models. And so I've taught in public, private, charter, all kinds of models. And more specifically, so I started my teaching career in private school in Austin. And in that school, there was this extreme lack of diversity. And when I say extreme, I mean like there was like 3 or 4 Black kids in the whole school. And it was very difficult to be a person of color there. And I will never, ever forget. There's a friend of mine who's writing an article about this situation. And I purposely don't run from these stories and these moments and these conversations because I want people to know what's real. I don't mind mentioning the name of the school. I will if I have to, but for now I'll leave it out. But I mean, this was a school that they held school on Martin Luther King Day, and they, I had a conversation with the principal of the school who told me straight up, we don't have to value diversity. He's like, that's not part of what we do here. And I remember thinking like, if this is what people are saying is like a really valuable model of school, I was like, I'm out, I'm done with this. So I went to teach in a public school, and I taught in Fort Worth ISD, and I taught at a school that was actually across the train tracks from the rich area of town, right? So like I lived in this neighborhood where there was all these TCU, Texas Christian University professors and their kids, and there was a middle school in that neighborhood for them. And then there was also a middle school across the train tracks for the other kids. And that's where I taught at the school that was for the other kids. And I saw for the first time like institutional racism and inequity played out in the public school system. And what was trippy about it was that people knew what was going on. My son is just people knew exactly what was going on. They knew that the kids knew that the other side, that other school, that was for the kids that have money, and this school is for the kids that don't. So my biggest battle there was mindset for those kids. It was where I started toying with the concept that I made my first TED Talk about, which is the culture of power. So I had to figure out like, before I teach you social studies, I need to teach you how to get you to see yourself accurately. And so because of all of that existed, I knew it existed in private school. I knew it existed in public school. And I knew that charter schools, from working in one, they weren't doing their jobs. They're stressing teachers out. They're pushing students to the max. I figured that there has to be another way. So that's why I made my exit.
Yeah. And, you know, I think what's so interesting about you is that you've always approached it from an entrepreneurial lens, right? It's like, how do we innovate? How do we do something new? Not necessarily disruptive, but how do we relate with what's going on, right? Because I think often a lot of people think about, let's disrupt education, like everything's broken. Yes, a lot of things are broken, but there's an opportunity to fix things in a way where they work, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit more about that. How did you develop this entrepreneurial vigor around wanting to transform and redesign it a little bit?
I was born, so I was born with it. Like I grew up, like when I was very young, my mom told me, my mom used to say all these things, just like most Black parents, and she said they came from the Bible, and I'm not sure if any of them actually did. Most of them didn't, but she would say things like, "Hey, if a man don't work, a man don't eat," and I was like, "What does that even mean?" But eventually, what I learned to do was I learned that my mom would look at me sometimes and be like, "Look, we don't have no money, so I don't know how you're gonna go to college." And my whole existence was watching my mom, who was this incredible teacher. She's really, really good. Today, she's still a teacher. She's really good at it. Was watching her work long, long hours. And I had this sense as a kid. I was like, I know I want to do that thing she's doing, but I don't want to do it in this way. And so I learned to hustle at a very young age. I learned how to sell stuff. I learned how to flip stuff. By the time I was in high school, I had this elaborate CD and candy business. So unlike most kids, I had a computer at home that had a CD burner, right? And so I would burn mixtapes from LimeWire and BearShare. And I would go to school and sell them for $3 a mixtape. And these kids didn't know that it was actually costing me like 50 cents per mixtape. So I had these very good margins. And then I decided, I can go from mixtapes to candy. But before I do that, I want to sort of enterprise this thing. So I convinced 2 of my friends to sell mixtapes for me. And then I convinced them, they were total suckers. I convinced them to give me $2 from every sale they made.
Wow.
$2. And the deal that I had, I was like, hey, look, if you don't do this, I'm going to report you to the principal.
Wow.
That we have this business and we're all going to go down together. So it's this very mafia. So I went from CDs to candy, then to sneakers. So my mode, my basic survival mode has always been to hustle and figure something out. So that didn't leave me when I went into education. It didn't leave me when I went to college. I was in college. I had a graphic design business where I showed up at this business in San Marcos, and I literally said to them, all of your graphics suck. I will redesign them for free. I'll be back tomorrow. And I showed up the next day with new branding, and they still use that branding to this day. Right. And so that was just my mindset always. And so when I got into education, I looked around and was like, what can I do that nobody's doing? So I tried to do the craziest projects, right? Instead of teaching my students about the Roman aqueducts, I got a bunch of toilet paper rolls and we tried to create them and flooded a hallway out.
Wow.
Right. So I've always had that. I don't know where it came from.
It's so funny because you mentioned it, right? It came from understanding and seeing the struggle that your mom had to go through. But also, I think what's always been interesting is on the forefront of your mind is there's a better way, right? I think a lot of teachers who are probably stuck in the education system right now, they're like, this is all there is.
Yeah,
we're limited. Right, but there's always a better way, and you always were looking for that gap. So I want us to talk a little bit about you and I work together. We're building an amazing company that has received critical acclaim from educators to investors and even students who are passionate about what we're building. I want us to talk a little bit about Guide, right? Because we've been working on Guide for quite some time now. It's been a labor of love. But I think one of the things that often, when I'm talking about Guide with people that they don't realize is that it really was an influx of, what we see is going to be the future of education, and also how work is changing too, right? Yeah. And, I want you to talk a little bit about Guide, and what was kind of a motivating the inspiration for you to kind of think about how do we rethink learning, but also merge it with where work is going?
Yeah, so 2 things. I think that right, in the short term, the best schools will learn from all of the content about the future of work. I don't understand why and I've never understood why there are not more parallels to work in school. So if you think about it like this, the traditional school system is a conveyor belt. You move from, right, this is why it's actually called, the traditional school system is actually called the industrial school system. And the industrial school model moves kids through it like an assembly line. Kindergarten, first grade, second grade, right? Elementary, middle, high school, then to college. And then hopefully you have enough of a clout, enough network to get a
Yeah.
job and then pay back all the debt you borrowed, right? Like, so college is technically the end of the conveyor belt. It's always baffled me that since that system exists, it kills me that there's not more, like, that teachers are not learning from CEOs, right? Like, why don't principals view themselves as a CEO or at least a general manager, right? It baffles me that education tries to stay separate from the world of work when really, like, that's in the United States, like, that's the purpose, right?
Yeah.
So one more, like, soapbox item is that, like, everybody loves to get likes and followers by showing up on Twitter and saying we need to be like Finland. But, like, let me take a second, and this has something to do with my answer to this question. Take a second to explain, like, why there's nothing innovative or special about saying that. Finland's not the US because, number one, our population is far larger. Number two, our economic system is completely different. And number three, everybody in Finland is white. Period. So there's no question of equity in Finland, right? Like, there's no question of like institutional discrimination. So there's so many other layers to that issue, right? And this is why, like, when you're talking about designing school and fitting it in with the future of work, in the United States at least, we have to be super realistic about who we are and who we are not, right? So I think for me, it is essential, if you're going to build a school that does right by children, to learn and understand the future of work so that you can literally interweave that into your school system. For example, at Alpha, the school where I work, and any other school that I design from now to the end of my life, the school has no classrooms. Our school looks like a co-working space. Right? Co-working is hot right now. People can say what they want about WeWork. WeWork, I know right now it's, like, really popular to rag on WeWork, but they changed the freaking world. They did. They showed people that co-working could be done well. And there's still, I argue, not too many co-working spaces that are better than WeWork today. So what you can learn from that is, like, adults like working here. So design the kid version of that. Right? And then kids will like coming to school, right? WeWork became popular because they created workspaces that people love to go to. Do the same thing for school, right? So if you want if you want people in your workplace to show up on time without being reminded, why don't you get rid of the bell system at your school? There's no bell system at Google, right? There's no bell system at Home Depot. You know, like, even at Whataburger, nobody's ringing a bell and it's like time to switch shifts. No, like, you look at the clock, right? So simulate that for kids. Why create a system that mimics a prison more than it mimics the workplace, right? So I think the future of work, and in terms of the future of education, they're going in the same direction. If the future of work is going remote, so should school. If the future of work is finding itself more online, then right, like, school should be moving more online, right? So
dude, I love that. I love that. You know, so our lovely community, Unleashing the Future of Work community, is showing love. By the way, this is a guide podcast. The Unleashing the Future of Work podcast is a guide podcast. So make sure that you check out utfow.com if you're interested in being a guest on the Unleashing the Future of Work podcast. So Megan is saying, how do you teach that to students and your kids, right? You know, in terms of, you know, this new way that we're thinking about education. Do you have any thoughts on that, Mike?
How do I teach, like, the new system of education?
Yeah.
It's just about being explicit and intentional, right? Like, I most of education, like, most of the solution to education is far more simple than we make it. Like, if you want a kid to be on time, look at the kid and say, hey, make sure you're on time to the meeting. And when they fail to do that, just say, hey, look, you were late. Like, because you were late, you and I don't have the same amount of time, right? It's messy. That kid may be late the next time again. They may be late the next 5 times. It's messy, but it's worth it, right? Because, like, I don't think that there is, like, I've become in my as I stay in education, I've become, like, anti-rules. I think that when when you set up a system of rules, kids look at that and they automatically feel confined. But when you allow kids to fail in a system that has a lot of gray area, it leads to two things. It puts pressure on the adult to build such a strong relationship with the student that they can navigate the gray area together. And number two, it puts what I like to call a righteous pressure on that student to figure out how they're going to navigate the gray area. Does that work for every kid? Probably not. I don't know. I don't know. But I know it works for a whole lot. I know it works for a whole lot of it.
Great question. That was a great question. Lee saying, my guys, love y'all work. Thank you, Lee. We love you too, man. We love your hustle.
Lee Thomas.
Lee. Hey, Lee, we're going to follow up with you soon, man. We working, man. Patricia said, I was selling and flipping mine for $10 when I was in school. I sold homemade greeting cards. Awesome. I had Angel Fire website too. Shout out to Patricia. Mimi saying this is a great topic. Learning should be focused on outcomes, not process. Thanks for innovating in this space. Thank you so much, Mimi. We appreciate you. Amen is saying, I just missed a whole bunch of this talk because my internet went down. I'm happy your internet is back up, Amen, man, because this is a great talk. Edward is saying, do we have a link in South Africa? Because he's currently in South Africa. Edward, we are coming to South Africa soon. We are in growth mode, but we do plan to go global. So definitely keep in touch with us. And, let's talk about education in South Africa. And, Eamon is also saying the industrial model is like McDonald's. It's standardized and everyone gets the same thing anywhere in the country. No two students are the same. Shout out to you, Eamon. We probably need to have you on the team here at Guide. Lakia is saying, industrial indeed is the current education school system. It is a product of the common school system and the reformation during the Industrial Revolution. You are speaking directly to the educational historian. Shout out to you, Lakia, man. You are sharing some wisdom with us. In addition to that, Barbie's saying, what can I do that nobody else is doing, right? So Think Lab critical thinking skills is something that she's currently working on to ensure that, the education system is a little bit different. So teachers who taught critical thinking skills before students learned anything else, they also learn what to do with the information they would receive and after learning how to think. So she's really currently focused on driving critical thinking in education. I think with that said, Mike, talk to us a little bit about when you are looking at the future of education, and we're essentially creating this world where it's learning without borders, right? Yeah. It's boundaryless, right? Like there's no limit to it. You're always learning. It's continuous education in a sense. Do you believe that the world is ready for that change?
No, but it should be. It should be. So I think that for a long time I used to refuse the term education expert because people the more
what does that mean?
The more I've been active online, people keep referring to me that way, and it makes me kind of cringe because the thing about education and the thing about the idea of expertise is that if you think about this, if I ask most people, who are the experts in society, they'll say things like, oh, doctors, oh, lawyers.
Yeah.
But think about this: a doctor has a medical practice, a lawyer has a legal practice. So their job is literally experimentation. It is this worked last time, it should work this time, but if it doesn't, we will rule everything. It's my son, for the first 6 months of his life, my oldest, he was in the NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit. And the thing that I was tripped out about, these doctors who had been in school for years and years, they looked at him and were like, we have no idea why he's sick. And my wife would say things like, he needs an iron supplement. And they'd be like, I don't think that's right. And then they would run all these tests and they'd be like, you know what? I think he needs an iron supplement. And we figured out two things is that these doctors are truly experimenting and they're allowed to do that. Education should be the same way, right? So I think about I would rather somebody call me an experimenter, right? Like I'd rather somebody say that I'm struggling to figure things. Yeah, like a scientist. Like through trial and error, through experimentation, I'm trying to figure things out that nobody else is, right? And so I think that's the way that you want to talk about like what's the best way to teach critical thinking. Don't open up some curriculum that somebody hands you. Like experiment, create your own, let yourself fail, let yourself bottom out, right? And the other thing is when you feel like you figured something out in education, I feel like number one, you should share that thing for free. I hate teachers pay teachers, don't even say that. But I think you should share that thing for free because everybody's trying to figure out the same thing. And I think you should share it boldly and aggressively and not care who disagrees with you. One of the things that I've learned, especially as I've been sharing content about what I've been doing, is like I don't, and I never really have. We've talked about this before, Tim. Like I took this life languages test, and the way that I communicate, there's a category that talks about like how you can relate to how other people feel about your message. I have like a historically low amount of that. So
you're not a relator.
I am not. Like I already don't care what people feel about like what I have to say, and it takes a lot of work for me to even notice like oh I may have offended somebody with this, right? So like I believe that like if you are an educator and you feel like you figured some aspect of this out, then you should be shouting that to the mountaintops, and you should not care who's going to disagree with you. Like if you need help navigating that on social media, one of the things that I love doing is when I post something and someone's like, "You're crazy. That doesn't make sense." I literally just write fake news and I watch them go nuts. Like it's fine, right? Because nobody's doing the work you're doing. So I feel like the path forward in education, like back to the question, it is literally that it's being okay with experimentation. It's being okay with being misunderstood. It is being okay with like running a play and running into a brick wall, right?
Yeah. You know, I think one of the things I love about what we're building with Guide is that it's going to foster curiosity, right? And, you know, when we think about life skills training and we just think about education and work in general, I mean, the most creative people, the most successful people in their craft or domain are the ones who are ruthlessly curious. And, you know, that's one of our virtues too with Guide is like, you know, if we're working with you, if you're going to be joining our team, we're going to be growing and building this future with you. We need you to be ruthlessly curious and ask questions to innovate, right? I think a lot of people, you know, there's people that we meet, Mike, that like they question stuff, and they question stuff like just because they want to like sound smart. They don't question to say, how can we make this better, or how can we innovate, or how do we improvise, right? And I think one of the things that, you know, I've always, whenever I ask a question, I always ask you, can it lead to an answer, right? Can it lead to a realization? Can it foster curiosity? And I think one of the things I've always been like, I've always admired about you is that you only question to challenge the status quo, right? Whereas I think as you mentioned, there's a lot of people who are currently in education right now, and they're not questioning the current system at all. They're like, this is going to be life because this has been life for the last 50 years in the industrial complex, right? And as we know, and with everything that we studied around the future of work, is that one, business, the markets, the world is becoming incredibly dynamic, right? So when you mirror education and you mirror work and you integrate them, you start to realize that you need to have a more distributed model, and more importantly, you need to have a model that is personalized and empowers the student. You know, our people are feeling what we're talking about. Sheila's saying, "Can I steal ruthlessly curious?" Absolutely, Sheila. Go ahead and steal it, bro. We already gave it to you. Go ahead. Edward is saying those kind of questioning is from a place of ignorance. Absolutely agree with you, Edward. So if y'all have any questions, or if you guys have any experiences around how education has been for you, please share them with us. If you have any questions, share them with us. We'll love to answer them. If you have any questions about Guide, check out guideapp.co. Guideapp.co. So Kusum is saying, how do you think about innovation when you are limited with your actions?
Like in school?
That innovation when you are limited with your actions.
If I'm understanding the question correctly, I think it is about like the term innovation is very interesting because today everybody assumes innovation means like, hey, I built this new technology that nobody else
Yeah.
has, right? Like, hey, I built a new kind of prosthetic heart, like using recycled water bottle. No. Like, also, like in the classroom, don't assume that innovation means technology. The point of using technology in she said no in your company. Cool, I got that. So I think that either way, whether it's company, school, whatever, innovation is about the little things you can do to make change, right? It's all about the little things. So, for example, I really am concerned right now with all of the parts of a job that you can outsource while still keeping the human being employed, right? So, like if I work at HEB and I hate working at the cash register, then I would love the idea of a self-checkout register, because I can now just supervise the registers that do the part that I hate, right? Not advocating for like more self-checkout so people lose their job, but I'm just saying like as a teacher, I would love the idea of adaptive learning software, because it takes in my opinion, the second worst part of the job off your plate. The worst part of the job is talking to parents. I wish there was a chat back for that. But I think innovation is about the little things. So even if you have a limited amount of time, or like a limited like the scope of your job is limited, think about every little thing you can do to be different and to bring about change. So the example that I'll give you is that my best friend Brett, he works for this awesome Norwegian supply chain company called DNVGL. And one of the first things Brett did when he started working there, and this is a little innovation, is he decided to create a training module by using Legos. So to teach people about blockchain, he made this Lego blocks, and then he used Lego chains and made the chains go around the Lego block. And he explained to people like each one of these links in the chain is how we're protecting the information inside the block, right? So he used Legos. Like this is a very small, very basic, simple innovation, but he used Legos to help people understand what the company was doing, right? And I'm sure he made them quite a bit of money.
Man, and I think that's what actually makes blockchain really powerful technology. Actually, shout out to Brett for that. Shout out to Brett for innovating at a small scale. But I love what you're saying. Innovation starts with the small, simple things, right? People think innovation always has to happen at a grand scale, but it's iterative. It's over time. It's adaptive. You know, as you learn, you grow.
And one more thing. The other thing is the ideas are small. Like I hate to bring up Steve Jobs. I love Steve Jobs, but I feel like it's cliche to bring him up. But I mean, if people think about
he's a cliche name now. But shout out to Steve though.
Right. If people think about Steve Jobs, he didn't say like Steve Jobs he never walked into Apple and was like, hey guys, we should create a phone that also has the internet and has all these apps and has this great camera that you can replace your DSLR with. And he didn't do that. He said, I want all my music to fit on this. That's all he did. Right? Like what I mean, watch the document movie, but watch the movie about him, not the one with Ashton Kutcher, the other one. Like watch the movie about him where he's literally like, no, I just want the computer to say hello. That's it. Like I want to say hello when you open it. Like if you think that's Apple, that is the brand that is now powering more than half of the world, right? Make it say hello, right? Like think about the fact that Bill Gates, Microsoft was initially a company where Bill Gates shipped you the parts to the computer and you put it together yourself.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Innovation, little idea.
And now look where they are. They're building the cloud and computing platform of the future. That's powerful, man. So Daniel is saying that's what students should be constantly asked, right? To do the little things in terms of innovation. Except people don't actually get the same thing. The very best schools have broken free from the industrial model. The worst schools are doing the industrial model. And doing them for my brother. You know, what else? What we're seeing that Chiara is saying, high school teacher here, and I'm enjoying online learning so far. Yes, Chiara, online learning, distance learning. I think, you know, I think it's the now. It's not even the future. I think this trend is here to stay, and more importantly, more accessible educational models are going to be the present too. What do you think, Mike?
I think so. I mean, I don't know. I wish I could say that I had faith that the system was going to change. My biggest fear is that you have all these people that are introduced to online learning for the first time. Coronavirus blows over, it's over, and everyone's like, "Well, back to your classrooms."
Yeah.
And I believe that's happening, and like I don't mean any. I don't. I am trying to be more relatable. Um, uh, I I'm just gonna say it. There's all these companies out there that are trying to maximize their income by continuing to support systems that we truly know don't work, right?
Yeah.
So like I've been throwing a lot of side eyes at companies because they're like, yo, you want to learn how to use Zoom so that you can lecture your students at home? Like, we know that lecture does not work. We know there's a
It's the worst way to teach.
Worst way. So there's a Washington Post article that's entitled "It Puts Kids to Sleep, but Teachers Keep Lecturing Anyway." That's the title of the article, and it says in this article that I believe that the stat is 55% of students that are in lecture-based undergraduate classrooms, they will fail the class because of the lecture-based, right?
Wow.
Like 74% of kids in K through 12 in this 1995 Hawaiian study. This is 1995. They preferred to be in charge of their learning on their own device rather than listening to a teacher lecture. So yeah.
Proof. The proof is in the pudding. Nah, you have a point, brother. You have a point. So Barb is saying, well, Daniel's also saying student-centered education, guide to the side versus mage on the stage. Ooh, like that. Guide to the side versus mage on the stage. 100% agree. Shout out to you.
So there's a great question asked from Lindsay Todd a long time ago, and she asked, how can people outside of the school system support equity and innovation inside the school system? And I want to answer that real quick.
Yeah, answer that, brother.
So I think, and this is like, and the reason why I want to answer is because everybody that's commenting, like, firstly, thanks for that. But I think everybody's commenting, like, the thing that you can do is two things. One is to put pressure on your local school to change. The reason why the traditional school system continues to be this large monster that nobody can slay is because everybody keeps sending their kids there. Yeah. So in Austin, there was all this hoopla in the fall about all these school closures. The city was closing down schools, even good ones, and people didn't know why. And I have a theory about why, but I don't want to get into that right now. But I was actually invited to come speak to this group of parents that were trying to save this elementary school, and the district officials were there, and the parents are getting up, giving testimonies like, "Please don't close our school. My daughter loves it here. Please don't." And I stand up and I'm like, "Oh, are you guys done? Cool." So I looked at the parents and I was like, "I want you to know that while those district officials are nodding and smiling and saying, 'Oh yeah, we hear you,' they're going to close your school anyway. Your time would be better spent in these meetings figuring out how to pool your own resources together and create a school that truly serves your community the best." And the parents scoffed at me, and I knew they would. And I got up and said, "Okay, I'm gonna leave." Wow. I said, "By this time next week, your school's gonna be closed because you didn't listen." And you know what happened to that school? The district closed it.
Wow.
And now those parents are on Twitter like, "What do I do? What private school do I follow?" Like, but they spent 6 months trying to convince the district whose mind was made up. So the first thing you can do is to stop supporting your districts by stop sending your kids there. Just stop, right? Like, I don't understand why we know that the school system doesn't work, but we keep sending kids there. I don't understand that. And the second thing that you can do is offer your expertise to an educator. the problem with education is that it's incestuous in this way that like educators feel like they can only learn from other educators, and that is the most bogus thing ever. The true mark of a great teacher is one that says, "Yo, like I was talking to this video game designer, and he said that he keeps people interested in his game by creating levels and different challenges. So I want to build my classroom the same way, right?"
Yeah.
So like, if you have some sort of expertise that comes outside of education, go lend it to some sort of educator and help them create a project or a product or a school experience that would be awesome for kids.
Integrative thinking. You know,
Absolutely.
Barb, had a student come up to me and say about 25 years ago and say, "You are a street teacher, aren't you?" I told her yes. And then after I teach the standards in the textbook, I then teach the real world. Shout out to you, Barb. You are a rock star. Barb teach Blade Reynolds. You are a rock star. So Chiara says, I agree, Mike. Too many companies are trying to monetize off of distance learning right now. And it's really, really sad to see. That's a fad. Daniel is showing love to Megan. We love that you all are engaged with each other in the Unleashing the Future of Work community. Shout out to y'all. Thank you for this webinar. What are your views on homeschooling? So Victoria, this is actually a podcast episode, but we appreciate it. It's as good as a webinar. So that's love. But what are your views on homeschooling? So, I think, so I don't have kids, but Mike, he actually homeschools. So he would actually be an expert on this. What would you say, Mike?
Homeschooling is dope. Like, so listen, like my job and what I do most of the day is I help build schools, right? Like that's what I do. But my kids, I have 4 kids, ages 5, 4, 2, and 1. And my wife and I are a little bit emotional because our 5-year-old is about to turn 6. And my wife is like, "Oh, he's going to be a man." I'm like, "Well, not really, but yeah, I understand this. Yes." So while I'm off doing that, and while I'm in this office, right? So like today, my kids got on iPads. This is what they do every day. My wife helps them, and she sets them up on the iPads, and they use Khan Academy Kids. And we're about to introduce some other apps, and they are homeschooled. And the reason why they're homeschooled is because in Austin, Texas, the innovative school options are generally not diverse.
Yeah.
And it's very easy for people to look at us and say, "Well, why don't you guys go be the diversity?" But it's another story to send your child and be one of the only Black students in the grade level.
Yeah.
Right? I love what we do at Alpha, and my kids, like I would be fine sending my kids there, and I think my wife would too. But the truth is that my wife is just not ready to send our kids off to be with other people for 8 to 10 hours a day. Yeah. She would rather be an active part of what they're doing. And for a long time, I used to discourage that. Like I used to really discourage that. But I have learned that, especially through watching my wife and my kids and the closeness in the relationship and the safety that they feel, is that the best decision for our family, for our kids, is for them to be at home with my wife, learning in this way. We also get a considerable say over like what we teach them and what we don't, right? So or what they're like, where they're learning, where they're getting their information from. So they do they work through the apps, they read the Bible, they read books, you're right, like they learn about dinosaurs, they learn about whatever, like whatever they're interested in. And we're happy to have a hand in that. Really, I mean, I am not homeschooling my children. My wife is doing that. She's doing the homeschooling. So
what an amazing woman. Shout out to Alex. Victoria saying, man, she loves the honesty. So shout out to you, Mike. Thank y'all so much. Valerie's saying that's what I'm doing with Socially Immersed University. She's immersing her students, I'm guessing, in the real world and offering real practical skills in her work. So shout out to everyone that's viewing. Mike, what are your final words for the Unleashing the Future of Work community?
I think you just have to be different.
Yeah.
Sometimes
be different.
Sometimes be different for the sake of being different. I mean, when we go back to Steve Jobs, I really do. I think that the reason why he was like, I want the computer to say hello, is not because he had Siri in mind. It's because Microsoft didn't have a computer that was saying hello. I just like, I know for a fact the story of the first ever Jumbotron. Do you know that Harvard University had the first ever Jumbotron? And do you know why they had it? because Duke didn't have one.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of, like, if you want to innovate, if you want to change the world, be different for the sake of being different.
Yeah.
Somebody asked about charter schools. I don't want to talk about
that. Let's not talk about that. All right, man. With that said, man, Mike, thank you so much for being on Unleashing the Future of Work podcast. By the way, Unleashing the Future of Work is a guide-sponsored podcast. Make sure to check out guideapp.co to learn more about Guide. We will be launching soon. And more importantly, if you have any idea in mind on who you want to be a guest on the Unleashing the Future of Work podcast, check out utfow.com, unleashingthefutureofwork.com, utfow.com, and submit a guest or submit to sponsor. With that said, peace, love, and be well. All right.